there guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another rules breakdown. And this time I'm going to be looking at the Masters of the Universe role-playing game, which came out from FASA in 1985. Now, this isn't really a role-playing game. It's a board game with some role-playing elements, much more in common with something like Hero Quest, which came out at about the same time. But FASA had ideas about this, because they planned in 1986 to bring out the advanced version of the role-playing game. And with that in mind, within this game, they actually included skills, attributes, and spells, which are not dealt with in this rulebook, but would have been usable in the full game, so you could carry on playing from the board game through into the role-playing game. An interesting idea. But that gives us some clues as to what the rules might have been, because obviously there's a lot missing from this, with it just being a board game. But we can make some guesses at how things worked, and maybe have an idea of what the advanced version of the Masters of the Universe role-playing game would have been like. So let's have a look. And so skills, and we fall down at the very first hurdle because skills are not dealt with in this game at all, except combat skills. So perhaps we can take some conclusions from how combat skills, how ordinary skills work. Looking at the character sheets, we can see there are some other skills. So He-Man, as well as having sword and hand-to-hand and pistol and rifle, which are all used in the game for combat, he has animal riding and machine use. Man-at-Arms has machines, machine use, and tinkerer, none of which are detailed at all. So we would need to take the way these skills work as very free form. If it sounds right, we would accept it. But they are on the same scale as the other skills. So let's have a look at how combat skills work. And it's on page 12. And basically you are taking the skill, adding it to a d6 plus any other bonuses. So, like an attacker in combat adds their skill level to the d6, and whether they're using a sword, a magic weapon, or club, penalty for flying. And then the defender is taking all of their bonuses or penalties and attaching that to a dice roll as well. So we are rolling two dice against one another and seeing basically which rolls higher, because this resolution matrix just really says that if the defender dice roll is 4, then a 4 is a tie, but anything higher than that's a success. So we can take that rolling higher than the opponent is a success. So He-Man's trying to jump on the back of a large creature. Let's flip down to one of the creatures. We've got a swamp monster here. That seems large enough. He-Man's leaping on it and trying to control it, because he's got his animal handling, animal riding. So he's trying to leap on it and tame the beast to ride across a swamp or whatever's happening in the story. Now he's got +5, and the only attribute we can see which is usable on the swamp monster is a +6 it gets for combat. So, saying He-Man's +5 against its +6. Now going back to the resolution matrix on page 12, we can see in combat he gets other bonuses. So if He-Man had other things which he was using a rope to try and tie the creature up and harness it, or there was bad weather so there was a penalty, or something like that, we would apply them to the dice roll at all as well. But let's just take it as a straight dice roll versus dice roll. So He-Man's got 5 plus 1, so he only gets 6. And the creature has 6 plus 2, so gets 8. So He-Man fails. He does not get 9 or higher to succeed. He would need to get 1 higher than the creature to succeed, otherwise it would have been a tie. Now, that's how I guess the skills work. It seems to make some sense. Going back to the character sheet, we can see the attributes work in a very different way. So I can only guess these would work in a d6 version of percentile, because if we look at them, each is based on 2d6. So the first number's a d6, the second number's a d6, instead of using a percentile system which it resembles. Now, this could be that you're trying to roll 2d6 under both of these, but I don't get that working. I think that you'd just be rolling 2d6 as a percentile. So we have Man-at-Arms agility, he's got 46. We are rolling 2d6, and we rolled 24, so that is under his agility, so he succeeds. but this is plain speculation. If you've got any ideas how a 2d6 based attribute system might work, please write in the comments below and let me know. I'm just totally guessing at this, working like a percentile system, but with d6s instead, because they're more common dice. And initiative. Well, it's a board game, so the dice goes around the table, everybody takes their turns in sequence. But if this was to be the full advanced version, I think it probably worked very similar, where you just add the games master, because in the board game there is no games master, but you just add him to the sequence. So everybody would go in turn around the table, because this is going to still be a fairly basic RPG, so getting confused by turn sequence and all that is really confusing matters. So I think it would have just been everybody gets an action and you go in sequence around the table. There probably wouldn't be a dice roll involved in working out what that sequence was, except in situations like surprise, where the games master might go first. And so combat, well, as discussed before, it's about rolling a d6 and adding various bonuses to it. So we are adding his skill. So He-Man uses his sword, even though he's pictured with an axe for some reason. He's using his sword, he gets 6 off that. He has a magic sword. Now, looking at page 12, we can see that a sword is +2 and a magic weapon is +?, because it should have a bonus, but it's not mentioned in the rules, because these rules are very hastily put together. So let's just say that it's an ordinary sword he's got. So he's got 6 +2 for his sword, so he's got +8. None of the other ones come into play. He's not using a hand weapon, a club. He's not flying. Now let's say he's fighting Skeletor. So we flick on to Skeletor. Now Skeletor has a sword skill of 4, and he has in his possessions he has a +4 magic sword. So Skeletor does have a bonus, and he comes up to 4 + 4, 8. So they're both rolling 8. Now let's go back to the skill matrix on page 12, the resolution matrix, sorry. So He-Man rolls 11, and Skeletor rolls 14. So Skeletor's the defender on 14. He-Man rolled 11, which is a miss, right down the bottom here. Now, if He-Man had rolled worse, he'd have got into the Ys or Zs. Each of these has a different meaning. So a miss is just a miss. A hit is, or an H is a hit, so you inflict damage according to the weapon type. HH means the attacker inflicts damage, but the defender inflicts damage according to their weapon type as well. W means the attacker misses and is dazed. They're an extra -2 modifier in the next combat round. An X means they're misses and stunned, an extra -5 in the next combat round. Y means they miss and drop their weapon. Z means they miss, drop their weapon, and inflict damage to themselves according to their weapon type. So, doing extremely badly can hurt you in this, according to the skill matrix. But in this occasion, He-Man did a solid miss. But let's say He-Man hit. What would he have done? So on page 18, if we flick forward to that, we can see the weapons table, and we can see that swords do 12 points of damage. There's no dice roll involved, it does 12 points of damage. Pistols do 16, rifles do 24, clubs, hand weapons do 8, and hand-to-hand, so punches and kicks, do 4. And we've got the spells below that as well. So if somebody was doing a magic attack, they'd be doing the same dice rolls. Now, certain magic items, like He-Man and Skeletor's swords, have a chance of deflecting magic attacks, but magic attacks do amounts of damage according to the type, or make a different effect. So +4 modifier to the defender in combat if they're casting a shield spell, teleporting, flying, etc. But basically they work the same way as other combat, and it's just a static amount of damage. You don't roll dice, you don't add any bonuses, so Skeletor's +4 sword is just a hit. It doesn't do bonus damage, it still just does the standard 12 points of damage for a sword. So we've done 12 points of damage to Skeletor, but what does that mean? Well, every character has a certain amount of life points. If we look at the character sheets, we can see He-Man has 61, and they've helpfully provided 61 little boxes to check them off. Man-at-Arms has 51, Teela only has 36. And if we skip through to Skeletor, we see he has 51. And again, they've got boxes to mark off the damage. So he's taken 12 points out of his 51. Now, spells, it's worth mentioning, do their own damage, but they also have a cost. So the Blast spell has a range of 5 squares, does 16 points of damage to a target, but costs 5. So if Teela was casting the Blast spell, she has Offensive Blast at rating 4, so she'll be using a skill of 4 to cast it. She'd be spending off 5 of her magic points to cast it. Now, how do you heal? There's no rules for that. I can only assume that people heal up with a night's sleep. This is a heroic game, so people going and resting overnight will be fully healed for the next day. Short rests and things I don't think would count. We wouldn't get that kind of thing. I think it'd just be down to a night's sleep and next day you're absolutely fine. Because it's supposed to be a heroic action-based series where you take some damage and you're ready to go very soon. And advancement. Well, we have no advancement system. It's a board game. And unlike HeroQuest, where you're playing the same character between different missions, there is only one mission in this game, to go into Skull Mountain and find the Crown Jewels of Eternia. So every character resets at the start of it. Now, carrying this over into a full role-playing game, I can only guess that perhaps you would be earning experience points, and you would be rolling, or you would be spending an amount equal to the skill to increase it, or perhaps the amount you're increasing it to, so He-Man increasing his sword skill would be spending 6 or 7 experience. Or perhaps it would be a system where, when you were using the skill, you were earning a roll. And if you rolled over the skill, and therefore failed, it would improve. So He-Man rolling 1d6 against his skill of 6 would never improve it. He's already maxed that skill out. But if he was to use his pistol, which he's not as good as in Adventures, if he rolled a 4, 5 or a 6 on a d6 at time of character advancement, he would increase it by 1. Which might be an interesting way of getting players to use skills which they normally wouldn't because they've maxed out other ones. But it's a total guess. There is no clues here how an advancement system would work, especially not with the attributes. So I don't know how you'd increase your life points, your strength, etc. There's just no clues here at all. So that is the Masters of the Universe RPG. Now, as I said, there's not really enough to go on here. While I can make guesses about the skill system, and I think I've come up with a fairly decent way where it's comparable to the combat system. And we've got a combat system where we can play around with some ideas there. We can change target numbers, making them more flexible for an RPG. But for things like advancement, I have no idea. I have no idea how the attributes are supposed to work, especially not how you would increase them. I have no idea how the skills would advance, how you would get better. It's all pure speculation in that section I've made on the video. But what we've got here is something you could maybe play as a one-off. If you and your friends were between long campaign parts of your Dungeons & Dragons or whatever campaign, and you fancied a laugh, breaking out He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, where you're playing He-Man and his buddies going up against Skeletor just for a fun session or two, I think there's enough to go on here and have a bit of a laugh as an RPG, but not enough for campaign play. But as I said, if you've got any ideas how these things should have worked, then comment in the section down below. I'd love to read what your ideas are. These have just been guesses on mine. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.